If you don't like something, change the way you think about it. Focus on what you can control and don't worry and put too much energy into things that you can't control. So I've got a lovely story for you where I learnt this concept, and it's going back a few years when my son was a lot younger. And our football team got to a playoff final, and if they won the playoff final they would get promoted from the Championship League into the Premiership League. So it was a big day out. My son naturally said, "Dad, get us tickets," and I said, "Sorted, son, already sorted, one step ahead of the game." And I thought this was going to be a brilliant day out. Now the game was being played in Cardiff because Wembley Stadium was being redeveloped. So along came that Saturday, and we got in the car and we drove down to Cardiff, along the M4, over the bridge, into Wales, and further along the M4, down into Cardiff. But I started to notice a change in my son's behaviour as we approached Cardiff. He seemed a little bit agitated and nervous, and then he started saying to me, "Dad, what happens if we don't win? Dad, what are my friends going to say at school if we don't win? Dad, what happens if we lose?" And I thought, I really don't need this. He wouldn't eat, he wouldn't drink. And as we got into the stadium, I started to feel quite nervous and anxious, that sort of big crisp of anxiety that goes on in your stomach. To cut a long story short, we lost 1-0. Of course it was the referee's fault. We're talking about football here. It's never the player's fault, is it? Not in the fans' eyes anyway. He was devastated. And we lost, so we didn't get promoted. And he cried all the way home. He was very emotional. And he'd had his face painted, and he had his football shirt on. The face paint was all smudged all over his face. It was all down his shirt and over his body. And I thought, what have I done to my poor son? Why have I got him to support such a rubbish football team? Poor lad. Well, all his other mates support all good football teams. We got back to near home, and I said to my son, "Come on, let's sing our song one more time, because our football team's got a very famous song." And he looked at me with very sad eyes and he said, "I can't. It reminds me of Grandad." And my dad had recently died, and that's why we support this team, because my dad supported them, I supported them, and obviously I've got to make sure my son supports them. He was devastated. We got home and my lovely wife came out and said, "Oh, have you had a good day, boys?" "No, please, just leave us alone." And then she announced that we got lots of friends coming round that night for dinner, and I thought, I really don't need this. What have I done to my poor son? He was distraught and I was absolutely gutted. More for him. 12 months on, our team only gets to another playoff final to see if they can get back into the Premiership again. And my son says, "Dad, get us tickets." No, I'm not getting them. We're not going for all of that again. I really don't need that. Of course I got the tickets. We got in the car. We drove down the M4. We drove over the bridge into Wales, further along the M4, down into Cardiff. And yes, my son started saying, "What happens if we lose, Dad? What happens if we don't win? What are my friends going to say at school, Dad, if we lose for the second year running, Dad? What happens if we lose?" Oh, here we go again. He wouldn't eat, he wouldn't drink. And I didn't feel like eating and drinking either. We got into the stadium and I felt even more anxious and more anxiety than ever before. But then it hit me, and I sat just watching the pitch, watching the players warm up. Then I suddenly realised why we felt so bad. So just have a little guess of why we felt so bad. So some people would say as well, because you had previous experience of losing and you didn't want to go through it again. You didn't want to upset your son again or see him upset. But it wasn't really any of those things. It was the realisation that suddenly I had no control over the situation. And this is why we felt so bad and anxious. From that day onwards, I chose to think about this concept. If you don't like something, change the way you think about it. And if you can't control it, don't spend all your energy worrying about things you can't control. Put your energies into things that you can control. In other words, your action, your behaviour to certain situations. Now in life and in work, I've learnt this a lot. in terms of only focus on the things that I can influence and control. And it makes me a lot more resilient and a lot more future-proof and a lot more bulletproof with all the situations I get. I often use this example: there's no such thing as a difficult person, just that I haven't quite learnt to deal with them yet. So if there's a situation that I don't particularly like, I've learned to think differently. I learned to see it as a challenge. Well, David, if you can deal with this, what else can you deal with? I start collecting situations that have been very challenging, and I store them up here, and then when I'm faced with another situation, I look back and think, didn't like that situation, but how did I deal with it? Well, actually, I dealt with it okay. How can I learn from that experience? So I've learned to think about things from a different perspective. It's a bit like if you're walking home from work and it's pouring with rain and it's freezing cold in the middle of December or January. But what's the positive of that? Well, the positive is that when you get home, you'll enjoy and appreciate your heating so much more, and you'll enjoy that bowl of soup that you're going to have for your tea. So much more than if it was the middle of summer and it was 25 degrees. So it's just a case of, change the way you think about a situation. And it's like if I'm travelling, I've always got a good book to read, or I've always got my laptop or something to do that's constructive so I don't feel I'm wasting time, or my notebook so I can just create some thinking time. So if my train's late, well, I can't do anything about it. Well, actually, it's a good opportunity to sit down and read my book, come up with some new business ideas, new video ideas, which I do spend obviously a lot of time thinking about. So just to summarise, if you don't like something, change the way you think about it. Focus on, put your energies in things you can control, and don't get wound up and annoyed about things you can't control, because you're the only person that's going to suffer.